I read this book in 26 minutes, and it's changing my classroom because I'm better understanding etiquette, being an advocate, and ritualized laughter. So let's talk about it. My name is Mya D, and this is 26 Minute Reads. This is my accountability space because in these videos, I share with you my takeaways from book number 1 of my 26 to 26 challenge, which is culturally responsive teaching. This is an act of self-love and investment into myself and a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. So this is more like speed reading rather than, no, I flipped that. This is more like slow reading rather than speed reading. And that's okay because this week I read pages 88 through 132. And let me get my notes so that we can talk about these takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is etiquette. And rather than giving you the textbook definition of etiquette, I'm going to say that it's the appropriate way to do a thing, which then makes me question what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and who gets to decide. That's a real question. So feel free to drop your ideas in the comments below so that there's an actual dialogue going on. I also feel that this is a great time to say that while I have several decades of experience as a dancer, an educator, and curriculum writer, I am not the know-all-be-all for this book. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue so that we can be better educators for those that are coming and that are following behind us. So with that being said, the question, whose value systems are being used in your classrooms? In the culture and communication section of the book, we find these words, and I quote, "The absence of a shared communicative frames of reference, procedural protocols, rules of etiquette, and discourse systems make it difficult for culturally responsive." It doesn't say that. Let me try that quote again. Take number 2. "The absence of shared communicative frames of reference, procedural protocols, rules of etiquette, and discourse systems makes it difficult for culturally diverse students and teachers to genuinely understand one another and for students to fully convey their intellectual abilities." So how does this look inside of a dance classroom? Let's say it's the first day of class, the first day of the semester, first day of the year, and students are aware that they will be assessed on this day. And they're prepared. They are ready to be assessed on their professionalism, their technique, their artistry, and so forth, and their performance. They come to class happy and prepared, dressed, bare feet, ready to give their best in this modern dance class because that's what they do. They do modern dance. The teacher comes in with their lesson ready to go, ready to assess these students on their hip-hop dance skills. The music starts, the students look a little confused, but they start moving. The teacher picks up their notebook, noticing their hesitation, and writes down that the students are inappropriately dressed and resistant. As class goes on, the teacher teaches a intermediate level phrase to this class because this class is designated as an intermediate level dance class. At the end of the day, the assessment lists that the students are lacking foundational movement skills, etiquette, ill-prepared. It's not looking good. The students don't look like they know anything. And the truth of the matter is, it's okay for modern students to not know hip-hop dance skills and vice versa. But the absence of a shared communicative frame of reference denied the students the ability, the opportunity to demonstrate their intellectual abilities, to demonstrate their skills. Because the students and the teachers were essentially speaking 2 different movement languages. And while both movement languages have value, they actually have different value systems. So if I were to restate that earlier quote in a positive way, I would say that a shared value system equals increased accuracy of assessments because it creates a consensus of expectations. And I feel like generally speaking that when someone is aware of the expectations of them, they're better able to reach those expectations. When they are aware of what is appropriate, they are better able to do the appropriate thing. What students bring to the space is valuable, and what a teacher brings to the space is valuable, but there has to be a space that blends them, that creates a shared understanding of what we know, what we want to know, and how we will be assessed. Make sense? Etiquette is going to change from space to space and situations to situation. We don't behave the same way within a solemn religious ceremony that we do in a football game. We probably don't dress the same way, and for some of us, it actually means that our language is going to switch some. As an instructor, this is a reminder to communicate those value systems without devaluing the systems that are already in place. And when and if possible, to collaboratively create value systems and forms of etiquette. Takeaway number 2 is advocate. T. Cockman is one of the sources that is used within the book. And in that same section, we find these words, and I quote, he says European Americans relate to issues and materials as reporters, not advocates, and consider the truth or merits of an idea to be intrinsic, especially if the person presenting it has been certified as an authority or an expert. Now, I include that because something different is said about the way that, or the standpoint and the delivery of African Americans, that they come from more of an advocate when sharing information. The communication of viewpoints and opinions are going to come with declarations of emotion, a declaration of your actual standpoint, and you then argue for or against that thing. And through that argument, through that strong declaration, you are validating yourself as a person of authority, as someone experienced and knowledgeable about this matter through that discussion, rather than through things like publications and academic awards. Zora Neale Hurston also talks about the communication of African Americans, and more specifically about the embellishments used in our forms of expression, and having in mind that that's also going to manifest in our writings. And sometimes this embellishment comes as a circular form of expression that gives things like a backstory before you give a story. The advocacy could be circular rather than this linear reporting style. And as an educator, it's important to know that this circular expression of information is understood to be a trace of someone's culture and how they were raised, in order to not see it as an inability to speak to the point, in order to not see it as rambling. We just had a bit of a technology vidump, and that's okay. We're going to keep moving. We're going to continue to flow like the water and keep it going. One of the things that's mentioned earlier in the book is that culture cannot be stripped from the educational system, because culture decides what should be taught and what is not taught. Culture essentially decides what's valuable and what's not valuable. Culture informs the way that we give and receive information, and therefore teaching and learning cannot be culturally neutral. So the question then becomes, what culture is used within the educational system that you practice in? What cultural systems are being taught to your learners? What frameworks are being taught? Another thing that is discussed earlier in the book is that the demographics of the U.S. student populations have changed. When looking at the population between the 2000s and 2015, students were coming from places like Mexico, nations in the South of Asia, East Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Central America, with less than 10% coming from European countries, which is different than what it was in the beginning of the century. And at the same time, it must be noted that the demographics of teachers have not changed, with the majority of teachers still being women identifying bodies of European descent. So, who advocates for the ways that students communicate both inside of the classroom and outside of the classroom, and help them to understand how and when to shift, and if it's necessary, to shift between these different methods of communicating? Takeaway number 3 is ritualized laughter. So I love it when I'm reading a book and I'm introduced to something that I was like completely unaware of. And this was ritualized laughter for me, the term ritualized laughter. The book describes ritualized laughter as happening in an instructional or an advising type of situation in which the student has difficulty understanding the learning task or what's being asked of them. It also states that teachers that are unfamiliar with this might see it as disrespectful, like the student isn't taking what you're saying seriously, or seen as the student understands this thing. But in this case, the student is neither being disrespectful, nor do they have this very deep understanding of the subject matter or the task that's being asked of them. Geneva Gay is the author of the book and shares that they noticed this behavior amongst their Asian and Asian American students and began to question what the behavior was. And the response that they received was equivalent to it's cultural. And this response was coming from her Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Taiwanese, and Cambodian students. Digging a little deeper into what ritualized laughter is and how it can be explained, it can be explained as a way of disrupting the intensity of a situation while maintaining harmony. Having in mind that harmony is something that's very valuable in the cultures that was mentioned. Now, I mentioned this was like woo, that's a thing to me because I have not experienced this to my knowledge. But I understand that this is something that I could come in contact with moving forward because I am a dance educator and because, as the book states, the population of students, the demographics of our students is changing. So I need to be aware of things. But what are your thoughts? Have you experienced this in your work and life experience? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. Or I'm always looking for a good book to read. You can also drop the title of a great book or just a book emoji so that I know that you're here with me. Thank you for staying to the end of this video. If you liked this video in any type of way or found it interesting, remember to like and subscribe and stay blessed, spread a good word, and I will see you again next time. Take care.